Hello lovely friends, my name is Aisling. I'm delighted to have you here. I'm here today to talk about books as per usual, and today's video I'm going to actually talk about 10 books that have been on my TBR for at least a year each. Some of them probably quite a lot longer, and I'm just going to talk about why I haven't read them yet and give you a little bit of a background about these books, and maybe you can tell me if there are any of these books that you just think like don't bother, or what the hell, just go and read it, it's amazing. So without further ado, we're gonna get started. The first book we have is The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. I believe this won the Booker Prize in 2013, so 10 years ago. I think that I got this book for about €3 brand new, and there was quite a bit of hype about this book naturally quite a long time ago, and I don't know why I haven't read it yet. I mean, it is quite chunky, but so in this book, it's a historical fiction novel, so it's 1866, and we follow our protagonist Walter Moody, who arrives in New Zealand, and he plans to make his fortune on the New Zealand gold fields. So he arrives on a very stormy night, and when he gets there, he comes across a group of 12 locals who are caught up in a very intense meeting, and they've met in secret to discuss a series of kind of unexplained events. So things like a wealthy man has vanished, a prostitute has tried to end her life, and a drunkard has been found to have an absolute fortune hiding in his house. And our protagonist, Moody, is of course soon brought into the story. I believe this is quite a sweeping novel, really quite long. It is, it's over 800 pages. And I don't actually know a whole lot about it. I remember seeing this around a lot, but I've never heard of anybody actually reading it, that I know anyway. When I say, why the heck have I not read this book? I feel like it's something that I will really enjoy, but generally I don't have big book fear, but I do sometimes put off bigger books because I'm not quite in the mood for them, and I want to be in the mood for something that is going to be so sweeping, so long, so immersive, and so I just haven't gotten there yet. Next up then we have The Murder on the Links by Agatha Christie. So I have read one Agatha Christie book before, and that was The Mysterious Affair at Styles. I found myself a little bit lukewarm towards that book, but I think it may have been her first ever published novel, and then maybe possibly this is the second. So this is a Poirot novel. So the man himself arrives in France with his associate Arthur Hastings, and they're going to meet a man in a French village. But when they arrive, they learn from the police that this man has been found stabbed in the back with a letter opener and left in a newly dug grave adjacent to the local golf course. So we go from there. I think we all kind of know the formula of an Agatha Christie novel. We have a crime, often a murder, and then we have somebody who comes in trying to solve this crime, and usually there are clues within the book, but nothing that will really lead you to realizing who done it until the end of the book, when you're actually told in a great unveiling by possibly Poirot the man himself or some of her other characters. Why haven't I read this book yet? I think I just feel like I'm going to read it, and it's sometimes when you know you're going to read a book eventually, you just kind of put it off and get caught up in newer books or other books that people that have been talking about that you get a little bit enthusiastic about, and then like it is quite a short read, so it's not going to take me all that long to read, and I think I would like to actually prioritize this for some time towards the end of this year possibly. Next up then we have something completely different. We have Outline by Rachel Cusk. I read one Rachel Cusk book before. It was Second Place, I think it was called. It was longlisted for the Booker Prize a couple of years ago, and I read it and it was fine, but I had bought Outline using a voucher that I'd been gifted for a bookshop. So this is the first book in the Outline trilogy. So this is followed by Transit and Kudos. Now I don't know a whole lot about this book, but I've heard that Rachel Cusk is actually a great author, and I think that she might be somebody that I really enjoy reading, but I just feel like Second Place wasn't the book for me maybe to start with. So We follow a woman in this, and she's a writer, and she is flying to Athens for the summer to teach a writing course. So this book is not so much about this woman apparently, but more so about the people that she meets and the stories that they tell her. I hear it's a book about writing and talking, about self-effacement and self-expression, and I really know very little about it other than that. Also, I really don't like this font, so I think that is kind of part of why I've been put off reading this, but also my mixed feelings about Second Place as well. But I am looking forward to reading it. I just need to get in gear. Okay, so the next book on this list is arguably the book that I have had the longest and not read. I don't remember buying this book. I just feel like it's been on my shelves for at least a decade, which is really bad because books are made to be read. And I have done many unhauls over the years and have still kept this book. I didn't really know what it was about until today when I looked it up a little bit. So anyway, firstly, the book is A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius by Dave Eggers. I've heard essentially that this book is a memoir about a college student who in the space of about 5 weeks loses both of his parents to cancer, and so he inherits his 8-year-old brother and has to kind of look after him and take care of him. You know the drill. I would imagine that I bought this book just because of the title. So A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius. I love really upsetting books, so I'm sure the word heartbreaking had something to do with it. I was actually quite surprised when I found out what this book was about because I literally had no idea. I don't know if I want to read this book. Do you think I should unhaul it? Do you think I should give it a go? I know very little about it, so please do weigh in down in the comments because I'd love to know, should I just cut my losses and send it on to a new home where it will actually be appreciated. Next up then is a book that needs probably no introduction. So that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. So I have actually never read an Emily Henry novel. I am not much of a romance reader. It is just not really my thing. I do enjoy some literary romances, but not this kind of romance quite often. But I did get kind of caught up in the hype of it when this book was published and decided to buy it and said I would read it, but it's been maybe about 2 years and I still haven't read it. So we follow Nora, who is a literary agent, a workaholic city girl, and she is seen as quite cold and withdrawn, and she goes on a trip with her sister Libby to a place called Sunshine Falls in North Carolina, and they keep bumping into this guy called Charlie, and Charlie is somebody that Nora knows from the city, and they have met quite a few times before, and none of these times have been successful meetings. They haven't really gotten along, and I've heard that they are not your typical hero and heroine, and I've heard that the banter is great. I've heard that it's probably a little bit deeper. Well, in general, Emily Henry's writing is a little bit deeper than your typical romance writer. Now, I don't know because, again, I'm just not really a romance reader, so I think that's why I have put this off. I also have 2 of her other books on Kindle, both sitting unread as well, so I don't know what's with me. I keep buying Emily Henry and not reading her books. So as somebody who is not a romance reader, I don't know if this is for me, and that's why I've been putting it off so much. And then the next book that I have on this list also needs very little introduction, and that is a very heavy book. It's The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo, or Notre Dame de Paris in French, and this is a novel translated from French, of course. I'm going to preface this by saying that my interest in this novel comes primarily from my love of the 90s Disney film. So that's the extent of what I really know about this book. Also, just a moment for this edition. Isn't it beautiful? Like it was gifted to me by a friend and I'm so delighted. It's like this lovely cutout edition, but it has like this plastic cover over to keep it protected as well. So this is a French Gothic novel, and it is set in medieval Paris under the Cathedral of Notre Dame. It is the haunting story of Quasimodo, who is a disabled bell ringer, and he is struggling to stand up against his ableist guardian Frollo, and Frollo is essentially attempting to commit genocide against the Romani population in Paris. This all sounds very familiar to me given the Disney film, but I'm sure that there is a lot more to it because it's quite a long book and it is a classic. And there is quite a lot going on in here, I believe. So I am looking forward to reading this, but I'm not much of a classics reader, so I really have to like jimmy myself up before I actually start a classic. So that's pretty much why I haven't read this one just yet, but I really would like to get around to it. I've heard that it's not necessarily as good as Les Mis, which I haven't read either, so let me know down in the comments below. Should I read this? What do you think? And then the next book that I've picked from my shelves for this video is another chunk of a book. So it is The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. My heart really wants to pronounce that as Dubois, but apparently it is Du Bois, so okay. But yes, another chunk, as I mentioned. So this book, so the scholar W.E.B. Du Bois wrote about the problem of race in America in what he calls double consciousness. So this is a sensitivity that every African American possesses to survive. So our protagonist in this book is Ailey, and Ailey understands these words all too well. Since childhood, she has been reared in the city up north, but she spends summers in the small Georgia town of Chickasetta, I believe, where her mother's family has lived since their ancestors arrived in bondage from Africa. So this is primarily a character-driven novel, I believe. It's a book about Ailey coming to terms with her own identity. She embarks on a journey through her family's past, uncovering the shocking tales of generations of ancestors in the Deep South, and through this journey she must learn to embrace her full heritage. I have heard so many great things about this book, about the writing, about the pacing, about the characterization. But then my partner Sean, who I believe has really great taste in books, started to read it and he wasn't super into it, so then it kind of put me off it a little bit. But I've heard it's absolutely heartbreaking. I've heard it's like one of those books that it was people's book of the year in the year that it was published. So I think I do need to get around to this, but I also need to be very ready for it. But it is blurbed on the front by my favourite author, Sarah Waters, and she said that it is deeply moving, and that should probably be enough for me. Okay, so the next book on this list then is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I will say that I have seen this film, but I don't really remember it. We follow Sophie, who works in a hat making shop, and she is the eldest of 3 sisters. And Sophie attracts some unwelcome attention from the Witch of the Waste and finds herself under a curse whereby she is turned into an old woman. So Sophie figures her only chance to break this curse is in the hills, so she seeks out Howl's Moving Castle to see if the wizard Howl can help her to break this curse. Obviously there is a really popular film based on this book, but I've heard that this reading experience is a little bit different. There's a lot more to it, which I find does happen quite often when you're going from a book adaptation to a film adaptation. They can't fit everything into the film. I have had this book on my shelves for just over a year now, and it is quite short, so I don't really quite know why I haven't read it yet, but I really want to get around to it, so please encourage me. And the next book then is the only non-fiction on this list. It is Blueberries by Elena Savage. So this I thought was a series of personal essays, and I believe to some degree that it is, but it's also quite genre bending, genre defying, in that it's also short stories, it's also prose, and so there are a number of different kind of essays or chapters, and every chapter covers kind of a different outlook on life. So it covers topics such as writing, the body, growing pains, and even abortion. I've heard it's smart, confident, critical, funny, and also an angry read. I am really looking forward to reading this. This is one of the books as well that I've had like a really long time, but I'm not much of a non-fiction reader. I do tend to really like personal essay books, but I don't know why I haven't gotten around to this one again, but it's one of these ones that I need to prioritize, I think, because I feel like I'm going to really enjoy it, so I'd best get to it. And then last but absolutely not least on this list is a book by Donna Tartt. So it's probably her least known of her 3 novels, and that is The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. So in February of 2018 I discovered Donna Tartt. At the time I was really unwell, and I had just had a spinal surgery, and I was mostly tied to my bed for about 3 months, and I asked my mum to bring me home The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I had heard nothing about Donna Tartt prior to this. I knew nothing about her history about the enigma that people believe her to be. So The Goldfinch was my first novel of hers. Well, let me tell you, I devoured that. I love her writing. I have subsequently read The Secret History, which I also enjoyed, but I don't think I found within that what I found within The Goldfinch. And I know that's quite controversial to say because a lot of people don't like The Goldfinch. So naturally, because I loved her other two books, I really wanted to read this one. I have read lukewarm reviews on this one, but I still feel like I really want to read it because, as I've said, I really love Donna Tartt's writing. Her prose is so sharp, it's so on the nose. She's the kind of writer that you read and you don't feel like you're reading, you just get immersed in it. We follow in this book, on one Mother's Day in Alexandria in Mississippi, a young boy named Robin was found hanging from a tree in his garden. 12 years later, Robin's murder is still unsolved and his family remains understandably absolutely devastated, so his sister, Harriet, decides to take it upon herself to figure out who is responsible for the ending of Robin's life. So I believe with that sort of preface to the novel, you think it's going to be like a murder mystery thriller, but I believe that is not the case, and I wonder if that might be the reason for some people's harsher reviews of this book. Like, they had different expectations. Now, I don't know, I obviously haven't read it yet, but I believe it's more so a character driven novel whereby the death of Harriet's brother is merely the background and the catalyst for Harriet's character and Harriet's story. So Tartt is said to skillfully explore the inner workings of this 12-year-old girl by leaping over the void that separates us from our youth, which sounds to me amazing. I'm really looking forward to reading this book. So why on earth have I not read it? Again, it's probably to do with semi-big book fear. So that's the entirety of my list. What do you think? Are there any books in here that you're like, just unhaul them, girl, they're no good? Or is there anything in here you're like, it is ridiculous, you need to read this book, you will love this book? Let me know down in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. I hope you're minding yourself, I hope you're minding each other, and I'll talk to you again in another video very, very soon. Bye bye.